I understand there's an issue that needs to be heard. Mr. Zonin?
Yes, Your Honor.
Who is your next witness?
We have Mr. Vivanco, Your Honor.
It's in regard to this witness?
Yes, Your Honor.
Something you want to add?
Ron? Your Honor, the brief that we filed dated May 11th.
Can you turn your microphone on, please?
The brief that we have filed dated May 11, 2005, illustrates the points we believe are irrelevant to this proceeding. And we believe, under 352 and General Rules of Relevancy, that this witness ought not be allowed to engage in any of those questions or offer commentary on any of those facts.
We filed our brief showing the 5 areas of exceedingly relevant testimony that we believe this witness will testify to. And other than going on a question-by-question basis, if there's something that there's no foundation for, or some other objection of that sort, I don't see any need for the court to make a ruling in advance. On the initial issue regarding the details of specific acts, we had conceded that long ago, so I don't think that is an issue before the court. We had no intention of asking specifically about that after we filed a brief in response. And there was another brief listing a number of potential objections to what potentially might be done. And I believe there's a foundation for everything we intend to ask. I think it should be question by question.
I don't know what you intend to ask. Do you mean you filed something in response to the one where there's A through M?
No, we had filed.
I have seen the previous ones.
We filed the one with the 5 different categories.
Which date was that? I want to be sure I'm looking at the right one.
May 12th, I believe. Called, Response to Motion to Exclude, and specifically in that response we indicated that we believed that the real issue, the issue that was raised initially, was resolved. And so based on colloquy, we set forth the 5 basic reasons why this testimony is relevant to these proceedings.
Well.
And the district attorney filed something I think a day later. We did not file another response because we felt we had responded.
Okay, well, I agree with the district attorney's brief that certain things are not relevant. And just on reading it, I believe that A through N are properly objected to.
A through M?
A through N.
N.
But I didn't see any of your other materials that you intended to ask those questions, but I don't think they exclude you from covering the areas that you indicated that you were going to cover. But these are areas that are properly objected to, so I'll sustain their objections to those questions. If you want to take a minute to go through them, I assume you've already gone through them.
I have not only gone through them, but I left them back in my office, so I have everything but that.
Do you want to look at mine? I was afraid I had left something of yours in my office when you said there were 5 things, but now I see what they're referring to. They weren't numbered 1 to 5. They just happened to be 5 things. So if you want to look at those for just a minute so there's no confusion about what my ruling is.
From what Your Honor is saying, I take it Your Honor has ruled and you're not inviting any argument on this.
Well, you didn't have the paper in front of you. If there's something you want to address, I would certainly listen to you.
Well, in general, and that's, I felt we had answered it, but maybe not. In general, all of these, as I'm looking at them here, with the exception of N and L, and now I have the paper and you don't.
Right.
With the exception of L and N, and I'll give it back to you. So with the exception of Lincoln, and Nora, L and N, which we do not intend to ask L and N, the rest of them would be admissible, I think, for 2 reasons. 1. For direct impeachment for both Gavin and Janet Arvizo, because they both testified absolutely to the contrary as to each one of those points. And secondly, for the state of mind of both Gavin and Janet Arvizo, because they both testified that contrary to those points that were made, all the other points except L and N, that they were, for instance, David was the bad guy. Much evidence was introduced by the prosecution on that. This flies in the face of it and it's an admission. But Gavin said she basically stayed in the room with her mother at all times, and yet she's out talking to people and talking to this particular witness and being very expressive about her upset with her mother. Her mother portrays herself as being concerned about her children, and that her children are close to her. And instead, that the children are. This particular daughter is calling the mother various names and making statements. I mean, that's a public record. I'm not repeating it unnecessarily. I mean, it's a totally different picture than the picture painted by the prosecution through the testimony of both Janet and Devellin. It also shows.
You can't impeach Janet's testimony with this, and a lot of this you didn't ask Devellin. So the only purpose for impeachment, you can't impeach Janet with what Devellin says.
I understand, Your Honor. It impeaches Devellin to the extent that she was saying her mother was sincere and in her room and was afraid that some of the direct statements to the effect that all of these children, including Devellin, have made about their biological father. And it turns out she misses her father. She blames her mother for that. Those are direct contradictions to her testimony that she's given so far.
Well, I guess one of the problems I'm having is recalling which question you asked which of the children.
Let me remind the court for a moment. Maybe this will help. Remember, Mr. Mesereau did the questioning. But Mr. Mesereau did the questioning of Devellin. And in the course of that, he had asked her about Carol Lemire, and Devellin immediately volunteered, Carol Lemire is a terrible person. She made me clean her house. And then Janet testified to the same thing. Whereas this witness will say she is saying she stayed with this friend. She wanted to get away from her mother. That Devellin was asked by Mr. Mesereau, did you tell Carol Lemire that you didn't want to be with your mother? No, I never said that. I didn't stay there very long.
The only way you can impeach that is to have Carol Lemire come and say that she said that.
We will.
So what she tells or didn't tell this person doesn't impeach that, because you didn't ask her. Did you tell this person that? You're trying to bootstrap yourself into something here.
Well, we're not impeaching her statements about Carol Lemire. We're impeaching the other statements that were made in the course of that questioning by Mr. Mesereau to the effect of, did you get along with your mother? Did you try to get away from her? And this shows that those answers, Carol Lemire was kind of the lead into that, but the direct questions I believe were asked of Devellin by Mr. Mesereau.
Well.
And she denied it.
See, if you'd responded to me in this brief with the sites where those questions had been asked, that would have been helpful.
All right.
It's not helpful to give me a general statement that all of this rebuts something that was said.
I understand, Your Honor.
And I think, absent you being able to show me those quotes that would justify these questions, I'll stand by my ruling.
All right.
Let's bring in the jury.
Your Honor, if we may, we'll call a different witness so we have a chance to look at this, if we might briefly.
Yes, that's fine. Respond to the specific items.
Okay, thank you.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Your Honor. The defense will call Mr. Shane Meridith.
All right, remain standing, please, face the clerk here, and raise your right hand.
I do.
Please be seated. State and spell your name for the record.
Shane Meridith. It's Shane. Last name is Meridith.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Mr. Meridith.
How are you?
Good, thanks. Where is your home?
Santa Maria, California.
And how long have you lived in Santa Maria?
About 5 years now.
Are you familiar with the fellow seated at counsel table to my right?
Yes, sir.
Who is that?
Mr. Jackson.
How do you know that?
I used to work for him.
When did you work for Mr. Jackson?
From 2002 till 2003.
And did you work at Neverland?
Yes, sir.
And what was your job there?
I was a security officer.
Were you a security officer for the whole time of your employment?
Yes, sir.
Did you have any training in security work before you worked at Neverland?
No, not really.
What was your work history, just in summary?
Prior to that, I was mostly in sales.
Did you have any training in firefighting?
No, sir.
Okay. Did you have any training to do your job in security at the ranch?
Yes, I did.
What was it?
The training that we received from the ranch, which was from individuals that worked there. Supervisors trained us on basic techniques, as far as detaining people or interrogating people, things like that.
Who did the training program for you?
Mine was a supervisor, or two supervisors, Julio Magana and Curtis Gordon.
And what did you do at Neverland as a security officer?
Basically view day-to-day activities, answer phones, maintain the security of the ranch itself. Make sure that, everybody that was there was supposed to be there, and people that weren't supposed to be there weren't allowed to come on. Things like that.
What kind of shift did you work typically?
Typically my shift was 6 p.m. to 6 a.m.
And was that your shift during the entire period of employment at Neverland?
Roughly. Some of them would vary. I think Sundays I would work a day shift, which was 6 a.m. to 6 p.m.
Did you ever meet someone named Janet Arvizo?
Yes, sir, I did.
When did you first meet her?
It must have been, it was in 2002. It was probably February, maybe March of 2002.
Would it be 2003, do you think?
Maybe around Christmas time of 2002.
Okay, that's when you first met her?
Yeah, I believe so.
And where did you meet her?
On the property.
Okay.
She was actually, when they were coming onto the property, I met her at the front gate.
Okay. Did you ever see her on the property while you were working there?
Yes, sir, I did.
And how many times do you think you saw Janet Arvizo at Neverland when you were working at Neverland? Possibly 5 times. 5 or 6 times. What did you see her doing?
Mostly just walking around the property. Either from the bungalow areas to the house itself or just, hanging around by the front of the house where our security station was.
Would you talk to her from time to time?
I think I had one conversation with her.
Okay. And where did that conversation take place?
That took place in front of the security office close to the main house.
Alright. Did you see her in any other location other than near the main house, that you recall?
No.
Okay.
Not that I recall.
Did you ever meet her kids?
Yes, I did.
And when did you meet her children?
Roughly the same time.
Okay. And they were Gavin, Star, and Neverland, right?
Correct.
Where did you see them?
You'd see them all over the ranch. They used to come up to the front security office, sometimes riding bicycles. I'd see them at the theater. I'd actually take them from the house, from the main house, up to the theater periodically, as I did, many guests. But all throughout the ranch.
Would you talk to them from time to time?
Yes, I would.
And why would you talk to them?
Just speaking to, like I said, to all guests. Just basic conversation, how you doing? Things of that nature. Can I get anything for you? Stuff like that. Stuff of that nature.
Did you ever see Michael Jackson with Janet Arvizo?
No, I don't believe so.
Did you ever see Michael Jackson with her children?
Yes.
And what do you recall seeing?
Just them walking around the house area or going up to the theater to view a movie.
Did you ever see Michael Jackson do anything you thought was inappropriate with those children?
No, sir.
Now, you say you saw Michael Jackson and the children walking up to the theater?
Yeah, once they were walking, and also I remember taking them up in a van, as well.
And what was the purpose in going to the theater, if you knew?
To view a movie. They were watching a movie. I'm not sure, it was a new release of some kind.
Did the kids seem to do that very often?
They used to go up to the theater quite often. Not necessarily to view movies, but just to go up there. There was candy and various other things for them to go up there and have.
Now, if Gavin, Star and Neverland went to the theater, how would they arrange to have a movie shown? Do you know?
They would somebody from the house would usually contact one of us, and we would either contact the projectionist, or they would either contact, a security officer that was directly in their sight, and then we would contact a projectionist and have them come up to put the movie on.
Would that happen any time of day?
Yes. If there was a projectionist on property, that could happen any time of day, night, whatever.
Do you recall seeing the Arvizo children at the theater in the evening?
Yes.
How many times do you think you saw the Arvizo children at the theater in the evening?
I think the 2 times that I recall them walking up, and the second time with me taking them in the van, they were both in the evening time.
Did you, as part of your work, go into the main house ever?
Yes.
And what would you do in the main house?
Either deliver messages, or there was a couple of occasions that I was sent in to wake up some individuals that were in the house.
Okay, and who were they?
Those were the owner's nephews that were upstairs.
And do you remember their names?
No, I do not.
Okay, and they were Michael Jackson's nephews?
Correct.
Where were they?
They were upstairs in the owner's room.
Okay, and describe, if you would, where they were.
They were, when I woke them up, I woke them up on 2 different occasions. And the first occasion I believe they were on the floor in sleeping bags. And the second time they were up and about, already walking around the room, but they just didn't want to get up, I guess, or something.
This is in Michael Jackson's bedroom area?
Correct.
Would you please describe that room area?
I only saw it from the doorway, which was, you open the door, I just remember seeing. There's a bed and then the floor area. There's a lot of stuff that was in there. A lot of tables and lamps and things like that.
Did you walk through that area?
No, I didn't go into the room.
Would you knock on the door?
Yes. Yeah.
And someone answered?
Yeah.
Who was that?
That was one of the nephews at the door.
At some point you saw them sleeping in the room area, is that right?
That's correct. That was on the first occasion I saw them sleeping in the sleeping bags.
Where were the sleeping bags?
On the floor. They were right near the door in the sleeping bags.
Okay, and you said that was a couple of occasions that you saw that?
Them on the sleeping bags?
Yes.
Only on the one. I woke them up on a couple of occasions, but most of the time they were already up. I saw the sleeping bags, but they were usually just on the 2 occasions. The first occasion, there was a couple. The one nephew was actually in the bed. In the sleeping bag. But the other occasion, they were already up. The bags were down.
And please describe what Mr. Jackson's nephews look like.
Slender, fairly tall for their age, I would think. African American. That's about.
Boy? Girl?
Oh, they were both, the 2 boys.
Aha, okay, alright. Did you ever see the Arvizo children in Mr. Jackson's personal quarters?
No, I did not.
Do you recall ever bringing any soda or popcorn to Mr. Jackson's personal quarters and seeing the Arvizo children in there?
Yeah, actually I did bring the popcorn. They requested some popcorn and they were in there, that's correct.
Who made the request?
That was made by, I believe, Star. I believe Star was the one who made the phone call to the security office.
And he asked for someone to bring popcorn to Mr. Jackson's quarters?
Yeah, if I could bring some popcorn, sodas, Red Hots, snack items from the theater. They didn't want to have to come downstairs and go to the theater.
Did you do that for them?
Yes, I did.
Did you talk to Star on the phone?
Yes, I did. Yeah, I took the phone call.
And was it part of your responsibilities to respond to requests like that?
Sure, it wasn't out of the norm for me to do that.
If a guest asked for popcorn or food be delivered, would you be one of the people who would do that at Neverland?
Absolutely.
This is during the night shift?
Night shift, day shift, yeah, whenever. Any request that was given by a guest, we were more than happy to help them out.
And did you bring the food to Mr. Jackson's personal quarters?
Yes, correct.
In response to Star's request?
Yes.
And approximately what time of day do you think this was?
This was in the evening. It was probably 8 o'clock, 8:30, maybe, p.m.
And did you go into Mr. Jackson's room?
No, I didn't. I stood at the door.
Did you have a chance to look into the room?
I don't believe I did.
Okay. Do you recall seeing any sleeping bags in Mr. Jackson's room?
Not on that particular night, no. As a matter of fact, on that particular night, I saw the children later on in their sleeping quarters down, by the offices station, those bungalow areas. That night they were down there.
These are the Arvizo children?
Those are the Arvizo children.
And you're referring to Gavin, Star and Neverland?
Yes.
And where did you actually see them?
On that night?
Yes.
They were, later on, probably about an hour and a half after I brought the candy and popcorn to them, they were in their sleeping quarters, and that would be, I'm not sure if it was the room 1 or room 2. It was one of the rooms. And they were, they were inside. They were in their pajamas, ready for bed, watching TV.
And why is it that you went into the guest quarters and saw the Arvizo children?
I was doing my rounds around that area. The light was on, and they were goofing around. They opened the door and they saw me, and we had a little conversation.
What time of night do you think this was?
It had to be around 11 o'clock. Yeah, it was later at night. I know that, because the lights were, if they weren't already off, the lights on the property were getting ready to be shut off. I'm not sure, but it was probably 11 o'clock, 11:30.
Typically in your work, would you check out the guest quarters from time to time?
Absolutely. We would do that on 15 to 30-minute increments. We would check the guest quarters as well as the main house, the perimeter checks.
And when you check guest quarters, what do you do?
Just walk around the guest quarters themselves. Make sure that the doors are locked that are supposed to be locked, and, make sure that the guests are either okay, or if they have anything that they need, or, we would give them what they need, things like that.
Do you know approximately when this was? And I'm talking about the time you first saw the Arvizo kids in Mr. Jackson's room and then later on saw them in the guest quarters.
The difference in time frame or the exact time of night?
Let me state that better. I asked a poor question. I'm talking about the month and year.
Oh, probably the beginning of 2003. I left employment in April, so it had to be prior to April. Maybe February.
Do you remember seeing the Arvizos during a time when you thought it was their final visit?
Well, I didn't know if it was their final visit, but I recall seeing them when they were packing out at a late hour.
And do you recall seeing them leave?
Yes.
Okay. Did you ever see them come back again?
After that, no, I did not.
Okay. Now, when? Let me rephrase that. The time you saw them earlier in Mr. Jackson's room and then later on in the guest quarters, was that close to the time when you believe they were last at Neverland?
Yeah, that was probably the last visit they were there. If not, it was around the last visit they were there.
Now, you checked the guest quarters, you think, around 11:30, right?
Correct.
Did you check them again that evening?
Well, yeah, like I said, I would do my every 15 to 30-minute checks, and then after midnight, 1 o'clock, I think 1 o'clock would have been my last check, right around that time frame, and then I was to relieve the officer at the front gate.
Now, in the main house, when you would do your security checks, where would you go?
Around the house. We would check the arcade, the bathrooms, the pool area, and just around the main house in general.
Do you know where the wine cellar is?
Yes, sir.
And as part of your security check, would you go into the wine cellar from time to time?
Periodically. It wasn't a complete destination, but we would check to make sure that the lights were off down in that little corridor, as well as the jukebox was placed in front of it blocking the entrance.
And how often would you check that area of the house during your shift?
If I was on the 12-hour shift, personally I would check that area. I would go through the arcade every occasion that I would do a house check, which was every 30 minutes. So, but I wouldn't physically go down to check the door unless there was reason to believe that that area was, there was somebody down there or there was a reason to check that door physically.
What kind of a reason would you need to do a security check of the wine cellar?
Either I saw lights, heard a noise, the jukebox was moved away from the area, or someone had requested that I go to check that area. Or if I knew that people were actually in the arcade, then I would go down and check that area.
During any of your security checks in February of 2003, did you ever find Gavin and Star in the wine cellar?
I did find them in the wine cellar. And I'm not sure the time frame when they were there, but there was a night that I did find them in the wine cellar, or an evening.
Was it in the year 2003, to your knowledge?
I believe so.
Were they with anybody else?
No, it was just the two of them.
Why did you go into the wine cellar to check it on that particular day?
The jukebox was moved away from the stairwell, and I could see that there was a light on from under the door. Because the game room was dark, there was no light on in the game room, so I could see the light from under the door.
You went down the stairs?
Correct.
You went to see the wine cellar, correct?
Correct.
What did you see?
When I walked in, I saw the two children laughing, giggling, whatever. They were obviously startled. I kind of snuck down on them, because I wasn't sure who was down there. And they kind of looked at me, and, were laughing, and I could see them with a bottle of alcohol that was in front of them.
Was the bottle open?
Yes, it was.
Did you say anything to them?
Yeah. I told them that they needed to get out of that area right now and get upstairs, which they did.
Did you see Michael Jackson anywhere near that wine cellar on that occasion?
No, he wasn't there.
Was there anybody else there besides Gavin and Star?
No, it was just the two boys.
Did they seem to respond to your request?
Yeah, they were pretty shaken.
And what did you see next?
Then I just inspected the area to see if I could figure out exactly what they were doing down there, and that's when I took a closer look at the bottle and I noticed some of the contents were missing out of the bottle.
Did you determine how much of the bottle was, how much of the contents of the bottle was missing?
It was about half full.
Do you remember who was anybody holding the bottle?
No, they were just standing. The bottle was on the table. There was a little kitchenette area that's in that wine cellar area. And the bottle was in front of them, and the two boys were kind of around the bottle, but I didn't see anybody physically holding it.
And did you ask them to leave?
Yes, I did.
Did they leave?
Yes, they did.
Did they leave quickly?
Yes, they did.
Did they actually run up the stairs?
Yes, they scurried.
Alright, did they say anything to you in response to your request that they leave?
Nothing, other than they were kind of caught off guard, so they were, a little surprised. And they just took off, when I told them that they weren't supposed to be down there and they needed to be upstairs, they turned and hightailed it out of there.
Now, at some point, you saw the Arvizos leave for what you think was the last trip from Neverland, right?
Correct.
Do you know approximately how close to that date the incident in the wine cellar was?
I think it was the visit prior to that. It was fairly close. I mean, all their visits that I recall, were very close together towards the end of that last visit, or that I assumed was the last visit, because I didn't see them after that again.
Do you recall the time you think they left for the final time?
Yes.
Approximately when was that?
That was, I believe, in February, March.
And did you see them actually in the process of leaving?
That's correct. Yeah. I was doing a house check, and they were being packed out. One of the limos was in the back of the house, and Jesus Salce was helping them with their luggage, which there was a lot of luggage that was being packed up, so I helped them pack that luggage up.
Did they ask you for your help or did you volunteer it?
I volunteered my help.
Okay, and did they seem to want you to help them?
Oh, sure. The kids weren't doing anything physically. They were just getting ready for the ride home. They were kind of watching us do the labor.
Did you talk to Janet at all as you were helping them load the car?
No, I did not. No, I spoke to the children, but I didn't speak to her.
Did the children appear upset at all?
No, not at all.
What was your impression of their demeanor?
They were in fairly good spirits. I mean, despite how, whatever. It was kind of a late hour. I know it was probably 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock in the morning. But they seemed in pretty good spirits. I mean, they said goodbye and they'd see me again on the next visit.
Did you ever hear Janet Arvizo ever complain about Michael Jackson?
No, I did not.
Did you ever hear Gavin Arvizo ever complain about Michael Jackson?
No, I did not.
Did you ever hear Star Arvizo ever complain about Michael Jackson?
No, I did not.
Did you ever hear Gavin Arvizo complain about Michael Jackson?
No, I did not.
Did Janet Arvizo say anything to you at any time about being held against her will at Neverland?
Not to me.
Now, when you were helping them load their luggage into the vehicle, what do you recall actually putting into the vehicle?
Duffel bags. They were, like gym bags, sort of large duffel bags. That's what I helped load in. I got there at the tail end of the loading, so there was maybe 3 bags left, 4 bags. I know there was some toys and things, too, but most of them were duffel bags. And like I say, it was the tail end of the packing.
Did you ever see a backpack?
I do not recall a backpack.
Okay, who owned the duffel bags, if you know?
I don't know. I believe they were everyone's. I mean, they didn't actually have names on them and nobody was standing next to them to claim either one of them. They were just there by the back of the car and I helped load them in the back of the car.
And did you help Janet load her possessions into the vehicle?
I'm not sure if any of those possessions were Janet's or not. Like I say, nobody laid claim to anything that I loaded in there. They were just standing, watching, and I helped load those bags in.
Is that the last time you saw them?
That was the last time that I saw them, yeah.
Did you ever speak to Janet on the phone at any time?
Merely to, yeah, actually, I did. But it was merely to pass along messages to the owner.
And how often did you do that?
I probably spoke to her on the phone maybe twice, 3 times.
So she would call you to give a message to Michael Jackson?
She would call to see if she could be put through to Mr. Jackson. And we would try to ring him and get him on the phone that way, or we would just send the call directly to the house itself, and she could try her luck that way.
As far as you know, was that the standard way she tried to reach Michael?
As far as I know, yeah. That's how she pretty much tried to reach him.
So she would try to go through you to get connected to Michael Jackson?
That's correct. Now, if she called a private line or something like that, I would have no knowledge of that.
Okay, now, did you have any knowledge, during the time you worked at Neverland, about how one would get into the wine cellar?
Yes, yeah.
What was your knowledge about that?
The door was usually locked, but it wasn't always locked, and you'd have to unlock that door to gain access to it. But the door was always shut.
Did you ever determine how the 2 Arvizo boys got into that cellar?
No, I did not. And I didn't take it any further than what it was. I told the house manager about the incident and I told my supervisor about, Violet Silva, the incident. But other than that, I didn't do any further investigating as far as how they got into the cellar.
Was that the only time you saw Gavin and Start Arvizo drinking in the wine cellar?
Well, that was the only time I saw them in the wine cellar, yeah.
Did you know anything about where a key was kept to get into that cellar?
We had a key in the office's station, yeah.
And where was that kept?
That key was kept in our filing cabinet, locked in the top of the filing cabinet.
Do you know if there was a key in an employee break room?
That I do not know. Possibly. I mean, that's a good possibility. Somebody in the house might have had, one of the house individuals might have had a key.
Now, when you say, possibly, what do you mean?
Well, I mean, I don't recall them ever.
Object.
Go ahead.
Object. Foundation.
Overruled. You may complete your answer.
Can you repeat it?
Let me withdraw the question and ask it again. You said possibly there was another place where a key was kept, in the employee break room?
Right. Yeah. I knew that there was keys that were located in the break room, but I didn't know what those keys were or what they were to.
Did you ever see any of the Arvizo children in that area?
Personally, I did not see anybody in that area. It wasn't frequently that I would go into that area, though, since it was located in the house.
To your knowledge, how many keys were there to the wine cellar at Neverland?
To my knowledge, I would assume it was just our key. We had the only key. I mean, I don't know for sure, but that's the only key that I was aware of.
Do you know if Joe Marcus, for example, had access to a key?
Possibly. I mean, that could be possible.
Do you know if the cooks had access to keys?
I don't believe the cooks did, because I recall them frequently asking us to unlock that door for them.
Do you have any knowledge of cooks going up and down the stairs into the wine cellar to get food that was in the refrigerated wine cellar?
Yes, I do.
Okay, but do you have any idea how they would gain access when they did that?
When they did that, they would ask us for access into the cellar. It was pretty frequent that we would, if they needed access to that cellar, that we would open it and just leave it open, since they would be going. If they were going to be getting food or drinks or whatever from that cellar, they would need non-stop access, so we would just leave it open, and they would come and go as they pleased. It wasn't feasible for us to continually open and lock, open and lock, open and lock, every time they needed to get access to it.
So are you saying that there were periods of time when it was open for quite a while?
Yes, that's correct.
And when it was open, how long would it be open?
Well, it depends on the checks. If there was visibly nobody that was entering the wine cellar, and we could see that they were done there, we were doing our 15 or 30-minute checks, then we'd go ahead and secure it. But if we could still see individuals coming and going, we would leave it open. So it just depended on visually what we saw on our rounds, on our checks.
Now, if you had a large event at Neverland, where a lot of food was being prepared by the cooks, would it be accurate to say that probably the wine cellar might be open for hours so people could go back and forth with, and get food or wine?
That would be a fair assumption, yeah. It could be open for an entire shift.
When you saw Gavin and Start Arvizo in the wine cellar alone, you had no idea how they got in there, right?
No, I did not.
Okay, did you ask them, how did you get in?
No, I did not.
Would you see them all over Neverland while they were visiting?
Yes.
What would you see them doing?
Usually playing. They were either, like I said, at the theater, riding the go-karts, the golf carts. On the rides, up at the train station, back at the zoo, they'd be everywhere, just doing, basically just doing whatever they wanted to.
In your opinion, were they well behaved?
Not, they weren't completely out, they were acting, not like totally out of control, but they were pretty much, they were there to have fun, and there was occasions where they'd break things, let me put it that way. There's occasions where they would, destroy some property.
What property are you talking about?
Golf cart. They crashed a golf cart and did some damage to it, which they denied doing. But later they admitted to doing it, and I believe that's the only real damage, other than turning rocks over or just throwing trash around and, things like that.
Where would they throw trash around?
Pretty much anywhere they were at around the ranch. They'd throw, wrappers of candy bars, and things like that, just kind of anywhere.
Anything else they did that bothered you?
There wasn't, like I said, they weren't too bad.
Now, when they crashed the go-karts, did you make a report?
A report was made, but it wasn't made by me. One of the other officers made that report.
Did you actually see it happen?
I saw the golf cart. I didn't witness them crashing. I saw them coming from the area where that golf cart was, but I don't think anyone actually witnessed the crashing of the golf cart. But they were the only people. They were the only kids that were there at that time, the only people.
Now, was your job at Neverland the first job you had in the area of security?
Yes.
Okay, and how are you currently employed?
I'm employed at the Lompoc prison.
Okay, what do you do there?
I'm a correctional officer.
Okay, no further questions.
Good afternoon, Mr. Meridith.
Good afternoon, sir. How are you doing?
I'm doing very well, thank you. Your job as a security officer at Neverland, part of that job was to prevent intruders from coming onto Neverland. Is that fair?
That's correct.
Did you wear a uniform for that job?
Yes, sir.
All the security guards wear uniforms?
Yes, sir.
Pretty visible presence there at Neverland?
Yes.
Is that designed to give intruders some visible presence so that they know that they're going to have to get through the security guard to get onto the property?
Yes, sir, that's a fair assumption.
Alright, and the guests are aware of your presence?
Absolutely.
And your job is to keep them safe as much as the owner, is that fair to say?
That's correct.
Alright, now, as far as the Arvizo boys at Neverland, you mentioned that they were a little rambunctious. Is that a fair assessment?
That's fair, yeah.
And is it also fair to say that all the kids who come and stay at Neverland for extended periods eventually start to become pretty rambunctious?
Eventually. There's no real supervision, and kids are going to be kids. So it's not uncommon for children that, are on the ranch kind of get the emperor feeling and kind of act up.
Is it fair to say that the fact there really is no supervision, they get to kind of do whatever they please, one thing leads to another, and that's probably when they start to get somewhat destructive or rambunctious?
I'm sure, yeah, that's a fair assumption.
Okay, what about Mr. Jackson's cousins? Would you characterize them in the same fashion?
They pretty much came and went. They were never there for an extended period of time. They would maybe be a night or 2 nights or a weekend, so they were pretty much okay. I don't think they had a lot of idle time. They were there strictly to visit and then they would go. I don't recall them ever doing anything other than playing basketball.
Would they ever break things?
That I don't know. No, I don't recall. I don't recall that they ever broke anything.
Now, at one time you were interviewed by, I believe, the defense investigator, and you indicated to him that you thought the wine incident was around Christmas of 2002, is that?
Yeah, it was roughly around the time of their, all in that area, the Christmas, February, March. It was all around that time. I'm not real sure on the exact time frame.
As far as your patrol duties go, your patrol duties don't really take you inside the main house unless there's some specific reason. Is that fair?
That's correct.
Okay. And this one incident where you went into the main house to, actually, I believe you said there were 2 incidents where you went into the main house to wake up the nephews?
Correct.
And you said you went upstairs to do that, is that right?
That's correct. Yeah.
So you went to a bedroom up the main staircase?
That's correct.
So as you enter Neverland, or I should say as you enter the main house through the main front doors, to the right is a stairway?
That's correct. I would come in from the back door, though. We didn't usually access the front door unless we were requested.
So coming into the main hallway, you see a very large staircase there.
Correct.
Is that right? Is that the stairway you went up to go to the bedroom where you woke up these children?
Yes, it is.
And they were in a room with some sleeping bags?
On one occasion, they had the sleeping bags with the children. When I woke up the nephews the first time, they were in the sleeping bags. On the second occasion that I recall, they were already up and, around and about in there.
Did you see Mr. Jackson at that time?
I did not, no.
You said that there was an incident where you saw Gavin and Star in the wine cellar?
Correct.
Now, your routine as a security officer is to go around and check doors and make sure they're locked. Is that right?
That's correct.
How often do you make your rounds in the evening?
Like I said, we usually do them 15, 30-minute rounds.
When you make those rounds, is one of your duties to check the wine cellar and make sure it's locked?
That's a fair assumption. I think it would be to go downstairs and actually physically check that door.
So if that door is left unlocked, would it be reasonable to say that it's not unlocked for very long? Eventually some security guard goes down there and locks it?
Correct. That's correct. As long as there's nobody visibly, house staff that's visibly coming in and out of that.
You mentioned that, if there's some activity where people are moving in and out, you'll just let it remain open.
Right. We'll just kind of leave it open.
When you went down there, Star and Gavin were laughing.
Yeah, they were having a good time. They were obviously playing, goofing off.
Did they seem intoxicated at all?
I didn't even get to talk to them that long. All I did when I came downstairs was, just tell them that they weren't supposed to be in that area and they knew better than that, and they needed to get upstairs immediately.
You said there was a half bottle of wine that had been opened?
That's correct.
Do you remember where that half bottle of wine was in relation to Gavin and Star when you went in the room?
They were behind like I said, when you walk into to the wine cellar, there's a kitchen area that's in there. There's a table in that kitchen area. The wine was sitting there, and they were on either side of that bottle, just kind of standing, standing, laughing, goofing off, pushing each other, doing things like that.
Any glasses?
No, I didn't see any glasses.
Did you smell any alcohol on their breath?
No, I did not. I did not.
So you really don't know whether or not they had been drinking that alcohol?
No, I can't guarantee that they were actually drinking the alcohol.
Was Mr. Jackson on the property at the time?
Yes, sir, I believe he was.
Alright, do you know if he'd been spending some time with Gavin and Star?
Not that evening, I don't believe so.
Would you know that? Were you spending time around Gavin and Star that evening?
I would see them. I mean, at that time, they were our only guests, so, I would see. If they were out and about, then I would, I would see them.
Was their mother there at the time?
I believe Janet was there at the time.
Are you sure about that or?
No, I'm not positive. I'm not positive.
As far as these dates go, did you make any notations or notes or anything?
Nothing really stood out in my mind as far as the circumstances surrounding any of those instances, so I didn't really, other than making reports if something was damaged, or the instance where they were drinking in the cellar where I told my supervisor. Or where I assumed they were drinking in the cellar.
Did you make any reports about that?
Other than telling my supervisor, that's all I did.
When they left the wine cellar, did they appear to have a key with them?
No, they did not. Not that I could see.
Did it ever come to your attention that they had a key?
I have no knowledge whether they had a key or not.
Mr. Jackson, of course, has access to that wine cellar, is that true?
With Usually Mr. Jackson would call and ask one of us to unlock that wine cellar if he wanted access to it. It wasn't frequent that I ever saw him go down there, though. I mean, on my shift, you know.
Thank you. No further questions.
Thank you.
No further questions, Your Honor.
All right, thank you. You may step down. Call your next witness.
Defense will call Mr. Brian Salce.
Please remain standing. Face the clerk and raise your right hand.
I do.
Please be seated. State and spell your name for the record.
My name is Brian Salce. Brian Salce.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Mr. Salce. Mr. Salce, where are you currently employed?
Neverland Ranch.
And how long have you worked at Neverland Ranch?
On and off for 6 years in October.
And do you know the fellow seated at counsel table to my right?
Yes, sir.
Who is he?
Mr. Jackson.
Okay, he's your employer?
Yes, sir.
All right, what kind of jobs have you held at Neverland Ranch?
When I started there, I was in the fire academy. And I was hired as a safety officer doing security work. Then when I completed the fire academy, I was promoted to firefighter, and I did that for most of the time I was there. Became a supervisor, and then just recently was promoted to fire chief.
And where is the fire academy?
Alan Hancock.
And when did you attend the fire academy?
In 99, I believe.
And how long a course was that?
I took the 9-month. I took it at night. There's a daytime and a night. I took the nighttime, Tuesday and Thursday nights, and Saturday days.
So you are a trained firefighter?
Yes, sir.
And when you become a trained firefighter, do you get some type of a license?
Yes, as far as I know, most of the fire academies are state-certified fire academies. At least that's what I went to at Alan Hancock. When you're done with that, then you hold a state certificate.
Now, there is a portion of Neverland that's involved in fighting fires if necessary, right?
Yes, sir.
And please describe that.
That would be the fire department.
Okay.
And, where you have firefighting equipment. We have a fire engine. We train. We do everything that you would do as a firefighter.
Excuse me. When you were working with the fire department at Neverland, were you the only firefighter?
No, sir.
How many, typically, did you have in the fire department at Neverland?
Over my course of employment, we would run anywhere from 7 to 15 firefighters, possibly more.
And were most of these firefighters trained the way you were?
Absolutely. In order to be employed as a firefighter, you have to go through a fire academy, state certified.
Now, would these individuals typically come to work at Neverland after attending the fire academy?
Yes. On some occasions, like with myself, they would start there. We had one employee that started there, was working as a safety officer, and then just from interacting with the firefighters realized that that's something he may be interested in, and then he enrolled in the fire academy. And I.
Now, would there be firefighters at Neverland 24 hours a day?
Yes, sir.
And how many, excuse me, let me rephrase that. What would your typical shift be at Neverland as a firefighter?
Hourly?
Yes, please.
Since I've been employed with Neverland, we've ran from either 6 o'clock in the morning to 6:30 p.m., or 6 p.m. until 6:30 in the morning. So you have a half hour of overlapping.
On each shift, how many firefighters would there be?
It's varied over the years. We used to always try to have 2 firefighters, with a minimum of 1. But over different times when they've had different levels of employment, sometimes we have not had a firefighter there.
And during the year of 2003, I'm talking particularly about the first 3 months of the year, January, February and March, did you typically have firefighters present at Neverland?
I was not employed during those dates.
Okay, do you know if any firefighters were there during that period of time?
I would not know that, sir.
Okay, when did you last work as a firefighter at Neverland?
Yesterday.
Okay, alright, you were at Neverland in 2003, were you not?
I was. I left Neverland in. I'm drawing a blank, in 2002 of November, I believe, and came back June of 2003.
Do you remember ever meeting a family named Arvizo?
Yes, sir.
And what do you remember about them?
Nothing different than any other guests.
Did you ever meet Janet Arvizo?
I did on one occasion.
And describe that occasion, if you would.
Met her, it was the day of an event. Met her in the theater. The 3 children were with her. They introduced her to me, and right away, she knew who I was, said that the kids spoke very highly of me, that they really liked me, that I was very nice to them. Gave me a hug, and asked me if I liked Mexican food and gave me their number and address and told me to write the kids. Said if I'm ever in LA, I should stop by the house and eat Mexican food is what she said.
Did you ever do that?
No, sir.
Okay, you met her children?
Yes, sir.
And were they Gavin, Star and Neverland, to your knowledge?
Yes, sir, I believe so.
2 boys and a girl?
I remember Gavin and Star. The girl's name I wasn't always clear on.
Did you ever observe the children at Neverland?
Yes, sir.
What did you see them doing?
Playing with the golf carts. Just more outdoor stuff. Riding quads, things of that nature.
Did you ever see Michael Jackson with the Arvizo children?
I saw him interact with them, but not in great lengths. It was.
And where do you think you saw Mr. Jackson interact with the Arvizo children?
I believe I saw him talking to them one day near the main house.
Now, where is the fire station in relation to the main house?
Well, what we actually call the fire station used to be up at the administration office. We called it the fire station. It housed the fire engine, but we weren't housed there. We were at an office down closer to the main house.
When you say, closer to the main house, what do you mean?
Connected by a breezeway, but not part of the same structure.
When did the fire station become permanently located up top?
When I started there, that's what they had always called the fire station.
Now, if you're at the fire station, do you have a view of Neverland? What do you see as you look out the windows at the fire station?
One window you see railroad tracks on a hillside. Excuse me. Another window you see the same. The other window you can see the parking lot for the administration office.
As a firefighter, do you patrol around Neverland as part of your duties?
Yes, sir.
Please explain what you mean.
We, the firefighters, are trained as firefighters, but everybody in our safety department acts as a safety officer or a security officer as well, so we trade off with shifts at the gate or driving around and patrolling the property. Just to make sure nothing is out of place or anything of that nature.
Now, as a security officer, what were your duties at Neverland?
Primarily it was to come in and get pass on from the shift prior. We would spend a certain amount of time at the front gate, depending on staffing. Could be anywhere from 4 to 6 hours. And then we would spend, if you spend 4 there, you would spend 4 patrolling. You could open buildings, certain buildings, in the morning to start the day, or at the end of the day you could lock buildings up. We would, depending on the hour, check on just animals, the zoo. You know, a lot of it's making sure doors are locked, or unlocked. Just washing the vehicle, washing the fire engine. And then the other thing, we would do house checks. If we were stationed at the house, at that office, we would do a house check every hour or so. And we would walk around the house, check doors, make sure that they're secure or unsecured, depending on what the, directive was.
And does that happen every shift?
Yes, sir.
Would you check the guest quarters as well?
The guest quarters we would check. We would check most of the time. If we didn't have guests, we would make sure the doors are secured. If we had guests, we wouldn't mess with the door that had a guest, so we didn't interrupt them, but the other ones that were supposed to be empty we would check. Yes, sir.
And what are the locations at Neverland where you saw the Arvizo children?
I remember one time in particular at the theater, and I remember another time that we had to go get them from down by the front gate. They had gone either horseback riding or quad riding, I don't remember exactly which it was, and I believe the little girl needed to go back to her guest unit. I think she was asthmatic and she needed to get her inhaler or something. I think. I'm not sure.
Did you ever see Mr. Jackson act inappropriately with the Arvizo children?
No, sir.
Did the Arvizo children ever complain to you about Mr. Jackson?
No, sir.
Did Mrs. Arvizo ever complain to you about Michael Jackson?
No, sir. I met her on that one occasion and she was happy and laughing, and that was my only contact with her.
Did you see her walking around the property?
No.
Okay.
That was the only day that I know of her being there when I have been employed there.
Okay, no further questions.
Good afternoon, Mr. Salce.
Good afternoon, sir.
I just want to be clear on the period of time that you were not at Neverland.
Okay.
You mentioned a period of several months when you were not employed there.
Yes, sir.
Can you mention that for me again, the exact dates?
I started in October of 99. I left in November, I believe it was end of November of 2002. And then I started again. I then worked for another company. Came back in, I believe, June of 2003.
All right. Thank you very much. No further questions.
Thank you, sir.
No further questions.
Thank you. May step down. Call your next witness.
Yes, Your Honor. The defense will call Commander Russ Birchim.
Come forward, please. When you get to the witness stand, remain standing. Face the clerk here and raise your right hand.
I do.
Please be seated. State and spell your name for the record.
Russell Robert Birchim. B, as in boy, IRCHIM.
Thank you.
Commander Birchim, is that right?
Correct.
Commander Birchim, the first thing is you need to lean into that microphone on the right side. It's hard for everybody to get close in this courtroom for some reason. How are you employed?
I'm employed by the Santa Barbara County Sheriff's Department.
You're a commander in that department.
Yes.
Is that correct? Were you employed by the Santa Barbara County Sheriff's Department in 1993 and 1994?
Yes, I was.
And in early 1994, what was your position at that time?
I was in the CID, the Detective Bureau, as a detective.
CID stands for Criminal Investigations.
That's correct.
Division?
Yes.
Okay. In any event, you were a detective, right?
Yes.
Did you have occasion to work with Detective Monk?
Yes.
You recall, in 1993, do you not, contacting a Qasim Abdul and a Ralph Chacon?
No.
Okay. Do you recall working on an investigation regarding Mr. Jackson?
Yes.
Do you recall contacting 2 security guards for the purpose of serving them with a grand jury subpoena?
In 1994, yes. Not 93.
Did I say 93?
Yes.
I'm sorry. Okay. In 1994, did you contact Qasim and Ralph Chacon?
Yes.
There you go. All right. And where did you first contact them?
At their homes in Lompoc, their respective homes.
All right. And what was the purpose of contacting them?
Serve them with grand jury subpoenas, a sitting grand jury in Los Angeles, California, I think, for May 9th of 94.
All right. Did you, by chance, review your report before you came to testify?
I reviewed a lot of reports, but yes.
Okay. Well, that's good. So based on your reviewing your report, you've refreshed your recollection as to these events. Is that correct?
That's correct.
All right. Now, let's start with Qasim Abdul. He was at his house in Lompoc when you made contact?
That's correct.
And both you and Detective Monk went to his house, is that right?
Yes.
And did you both identify yourselves as sheriff's detectives?
Yes, we did.
Did you serve him with the subpoena? You accomplished that task?
Yes.
And at that time, did he give you any information about criminal activity or alleged criminal activity with regard to anyone at Neverland Valley Ranch?
No.
Did you leave him, then, with a subpoena and go about your business?
Yes.
Did you also contact Ralph Chacon?
Yes.
And similarly, did you and Detective Monk meet him at his house in Lompoc?
Yes, we did.
Did you serve him with a grand jury subpoena for the LA County Grand Jury?
Yes.
And I take it you also identified yourselves as detectives for the Santa Barbara County Sheriff's Department?
We did.
Did Ralph Chacon give you any information about any alleged criminal activity at Neverland Ranch?
No.
And I take it, after you served them, you went about your business. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Actually, before you left either of those people, well, let's do it one at a time. Before you left Mr. Abdul on that date, did you give him a business card?
Yes, we did.
And did you tell him that if he wanted to discuss any observation or knowledge regarding any activity on the ranch, that he could call you?
Yes.
And did you do the same thing with Mr. Chacon?
Yes.
And as of the time you left them on that day, they did not give you any information whatsoever about anything pertaining to the investigation. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Did we establish that day was April 29, 94?
Yes, sir.
Now, when was the next time you had any contact with Mr. Abdul?
That would have been on May 4th, I believe, of 94.
May 4th. Did Mr. Abdul phone and request a meeting?
Yes, he did.
Did he have any restrictions on what kind of a meeting he would have with you?
Yes.
What were the restrictions?
He wanted to meet Detective Monk and I alone with Ralph Chacon, in a secluded area away from Santa Maria and Santa Barbara.
All right. On the telephone, did he give any information about any alleged information that he might claim to have?
I'm not sure if he did on the phone at that point. I don't believe so.
You say you do not believe so?
I don't believe so.
And in fact, you set up a meeting at an isolated and relatively private place, is that correct?
That's correct.
And what place did you select?
Gaviota rest stop on US 101 halfway between here and Santa Barbara.
Is that something that you have mutually agreed upon between yourselves and the Sheriff's Department and Mr. Abdul on behalf of Mr. Chacon?
Yes.
Did you meet them at the rest stop?
Yes, we did.
And what day was that?
I believe that was either the same day or the following day. May 4th, 5th.
All right. Did you bring that report with you?
No, I didn't.
Would it help refresh your recollection to see a copy of that report?
Yes.
For the date, may I approach, Your Honor?
Yes.
Commander, having reviewed the report, does that refresh your recollection as to the date that you met with Mr. Abdul and Mr. Chacon at the Gaviota rest stop?
Yes, it was May 5th, 94.
And at that time, who did the talking? Mr. Abdul or Mr. Chacon?
Mr. Abdul.
Did Mr. Chacon speak with you at all?
Very briefly.
All right. Did Mr. Abdul tell you that he had any specific information with regard to any criminal activity?
No, he didn't.
Did he request a meeting with Deputy District Attorney Tom Sneddon?
Yes.
I'm sorry. With District Attorney Tom Sneddon?
Yes.
Almost caught me on that one. All right. And did you arrange for a meeting between Mr. Abdul and Mr. Chacon and Mr. Sneddon?
Yes.
Did you attend the meeting that eventually occurred?
Yes, I did.
Okay. Now, when did that meeting occur?
May 6th, 94.
All right. And who was present besides Mr. Sneddon?
Ralph Chacon, Qasim Abdul and myself. I believe Detective Monk was also there.
All right. At that time, did Mr. Abdul or Mr. Chacon state that they had eyewitness accounts as witnesses of illegal activity?
No, they did not.
Did they ask hypothetical questions in the form, well, what if we had information?
They did not specify, They asked what if they had information.
Did they ask if they could be placed into a government witness program?
Yes, they did.
Did they ask what was involved in being placed in a government witness program?
Yes.
Did they ask if they would receive compensation while in that program?
I don't believe it was that general, it was more general than that. It wasn't that specific as to what they would receive.
Did Mr. Chacon indicate that he owed child support?
Yes.
At some point during this conversation, did both Mr. Abdul and Mr. Chacon say that they had information that the tabloids would probably purchase from them?
I don't remember the specific words. It was akin to that statement, yes.
And did they tell you that instead, they felt morally obligated to tell the truth in the grand jury proceedings?
Yes.
And did they tell you that they felt morally obligated not to seek money for what they might know?
Possibly. I don't recall.
Would it help to look at your report?
Yes.
May I approach, Your Honor?
Yes. I'm referring to right there, but you can read whatever you want. Thank you.
Does that refresh your recollection?
Yes.
Did they say that they felt morally obligated not to seek money for what they knew?
Yes, they did.
At the conclusion of the meeting, They still had not told either you, Detective Monk, or District Attorney Tom Sneddon what they knew. Is that right?
That's correct.
I have no further questions.
Judge, it is the break time.
Commander, I've been waiting 30 years to do this.
Move to strike that remark. I'm not sure I know what it meant, but I would move to strike it.
To cross-examine him. That's what I meant. I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
The first time you contacted Mr. Qasim Abdul was on the 29th of April of 1994 to serve a subpoena for the grand jury, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
And when you served that subpoena on Mr. Abdul, he did indicate to you at that time that he was afraid to appear before the grand jury, did he not?
Yes, he did.
And he stated to you, in fact, that he was afraid to appear before the grand jury because it might jeopardize his job. Isn't that correct?
Yes.
And that he was in fear if he had to tell the truth. Isn't that correct?
Yes, it is.
And when you got to Mr. Chacon's house, you served a warrant. You served a subpoena on Mr. Chacon, correct?
That's correct.
And when you served the subpoena on Mr. Chacon, he also indicated to you that he felt that if he honored that subpoena that it could jeopardize his job at the ranch?
That's correct.
And he also told you that if he had to tell the truth as to what he knew before the grand jury, that he was in fear for his family and his life.
That's correct.
Counsel, break time.
I was just getting going, Judge.